will the Europeans, will the Americans get behind that and take the risk that this war gets even hotter before it gets more successful for the Ukrainians?
Pleasure. Jason, I'll start with you. I know that you're not in the area tonight, but of course you've got a close eye on it and sources on the ground. Can you describe, as you understand it, the scenes that have played out this weekend?
Sure. I mean, it's been absolutely huge. Russia's retreat has left a lot of people very happy. The entrance of Ukrainian troops was not resisted whatsoever. There was no partisan attacks by pro-Russian forces or anything like this. It was widely accepted, and it was widely rejoiced. I mean, the videos, the photographs, they speak for themselves. I mean, there was literally tens of thousands of people in the streets today with Ukrainian flags. It was a momentous day.
Front page of the Sunday Times on tomorrow has an image of two people on the streets of Ukraine with Ukrainian flags draped around them, smiles ear to ear. And that is, as you say, a scene that we have not seen in the country for a while. Then, Jason, there's the reality, isn't there, on the ground, and the condition that the region finds itself in. Back in Ukrainian forces, back in Ukrainian hands, Jason, but not in good shape. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's quite a challenging situation. There's not electricity, there's not running water, there's not sewage, there's not a lot of things, and so there is going to be an uphill battle ahead to get the region back into working order. That being said, there is nonetheless, I mean, as people have said, and you've probably seen this in numerous interviews, they prefer to be without water, to be without electricity, than to be in the hands of Moscow.
Yeah, that seems fair. There is also the remaining risk of mines and booby traps left behind by Russian soldiers. What kind of effort, Jason, is going into ensuring that it's safe?
And that's been a very significant effort. It's been much more challenging than was originally imagined. And as we saw back in February or March, when the Russians withdrew from all parts of Ukraine, there has been a huge effort by the Russians to specifically booby trap dwellings of civilians, areas where civilians would be, around food, around things that normal common people would try to reach out to, not around weapons, but to booby trap things that common people would try to access. And so it is alarming because it's normal people, it's common people who are the ones being blown up by these Russian booby traps.
And speaking of normal people, common people, Jason, there's a video that you've posted in the last hour to Twitter. I'm just watching it now, and it's absolutely incredible. It's really, really emotional. Of a soldier who runs to greet his grandmother. They both drop to their knees and they hug and they embrace at her door. He part of the effort to liberate her son, and she clearly somebody who has lived through this horror. That's the personal side of the story, isn't it, Jason?
It is certainly, and the numbers of stories you see like this, where it's in the case of the video referred to, where yes, it was a grandson who had been through the battle to liberate her son. His family was originally from there, but he had left the city a while ago, and he was part of the troops. And part of his colleagues have died, liberating the city, and his grandmother is there wailing in the street, thanking him and thanking his colleagues for what they've done for the city.
It's very, very emotional, isn't it? Jamil, help us zoom out slightly here. How does this change, if at all, the dynamics of this war?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, this new change, this retaking of Kherson, is a great example of Ukraine getting back the advantage. This is the only regional capital that Russia had taken in this entire conflict. It's symbolic of the decline of Russia's capabilities in the region and their ability to lean forward. And so, as much as the Russians portray this as a smart strategic move and simply a reconsolidation of its forces, it really is a significant both political and military loss for Russia.
Okay, so in terms of the way that Putin's framing it, Jamil, that's how it's being sold at home in Russia, is it?
Exactly, that it's simply a strategic step back, a reconsolidation of forces, and a pause in an effort to lean forward later on. That's clearly what this is not. This is a huge loss to Putin's effort to create that land bridge between Crimea and the home part of Russia.
And if Putin knows that and feels his back's against the wall in this way, Jamil, what does that do to the likelihood of, say, missile attacks?
Well, there's been this concern that if the Ukrainians are too successful, or if the United States provides, or European allies provide too many weapons, that Vladimir Putin will lash out and will get even more aggressive. But let's be candid here, Daryl. He's already gotten extremely aggressive. He's murdered thousands of civilians. He's bombed apartment buildings, schools, and hospitals. There's not much more brutal that Vladimir Putin can get in this war other than going to chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. And in my view, that seems very unlikely given the reaction he knows he'll get from the world if, in fact, he goes down that road. So I don't see a lot of risk here in the sense that Vladimir Putin lashing out. He's done all of what he can, and he's simply failing at this conflict.
And we've been considering, haven't we, Jamil, that the Putin is one part of this jigsaw in the Kremlin, isn't he? There are lots and lots of people around him, some of whom answer to him, and some of whom he is answerable to, even if that's kind of happening behind the scenes. He does rely on the support of some of those people around him at the Kremlin in order to stay in a position of power. What does this moment do to his grip on power?
Well, that's a great question. So the question is, can he sustain power in Russia as he continues to suffer defeat after defeat in this conflict? And that's a very tough question to answer. As you point out, it is very much a back and forth relationship between him and the oligarchs around him, him and the military, him and the FSB and the GRU. And he has sought very aggressively to purge out anybody that might be a rival or any factions opposed to him. At the same time, if he continues to face these defeats, right, there's a possibility he's replaced. Now, the question is he replaced with somebody even worse? And that's the hard part to answer at this point.
Okay. Jason, you've been following some Russian accounts on Telegram in the last couple of days since this retreat. This is really, really interesting because can you just talk us through what you've seen? A screenshot that you shared in which they are sort of advising Russians with property in Crimea now to leave.
Sure. So, I mean, yes, I've been following Telegram since right before the war started, and what you see is that there's a huge increase in the change of language. Before the war started, there's a lot of optimism. As the war's gone on, optimism maintained, but it became a little bit more skeptical. Well, this is a setback, but it's going to get better. Well, they're doing this, but don't worry, there's a plan. And now it's gone to a different extreme. When these are not accounts controlled by the Kremlin, these are accounts controlled by people favorable to the Kremlin, and it's become much more direct. That listen, things have really not gone the right way. It seems that things are really gotten out of control, and perhaps even, and as the one I posted on Telegram said, on Twitter said, we have lost the war. There's no longer hope. It is better to abandon your properties, to get rid of, to ditch, to sell off your properties in Crimea, your properties in occupied Ukraine, and to get out of the country as fast as you can. Don't have hopes or expectations that you'll be met as a friend with your Ukrainian passport, which you socked away for a couple of years, that now all of a sudden everything will be forgiven and forgotten. It is better to escape back to Russia at this point. And I think that is a popular sentiment. I think that Russians who are in occupied territories realize that tides of history are turning against them.
Blimey, that's extraordinary, isn't it? People being told on those Telegram accounts, we have lost the war, get out of the country, retreat, and a significant change in language. Jamil, do you feel that that is a fair indicator of where this war is really up to?
Well, I think so. I think that really does demonstrate the real challenges that are at play here and the real threats that are possible to take place. And so the real question now becomes, what's the next play? How much more successful can the Ukrainian forces be? Can they push Vladimir Putin and his forces even further back to the boundaries and make him suffer a bigger defeat? And to be candid with you, what it really is going to take is even more support from the West, even more of those supplies that we've already been providing. Now is the time to deliver that final blow to Putin's forces if we can afford to do it. That's the big question. Will the Europeans, will the Americans get behind that and take the risk that this war gets even hotter before it gets more successful for the Ukrainians?